The most dangerous person in your life was never the one who hurt you. It is the version of yourself that keeps walking back into the wound just to check whether it still stings. Pain arrives once. Suffering only continues when you keep feeding it, meal after meal, night after night. Today, we are going to talk about how to stop feeding it. The next person who tries to wound you is not the real threat. The real threat is the part of you that still believes their words carry more weight than your own awareness of yourself. Listen closely, because once this idea settles into you, insults lose their bite. Rejection loses its grip. Betrayal loses its venom. And the old wounds you have been carrying around like stones hidden inside your chest stop deciding how you breathe, how you walk, how you love, and how you see yourself. Most people spend their entire lives trying to make the world gentler. They plead with others to be kinder. They hope people will finally understand them. They wait for apologies that never come. They lie awake, replaying old conversations, asking themselves why someone said what they said, why they did what they did, why they weren't enough, why they trusted so easily, why they missed the warning signs. And while the other person sleeps soundly, unaware, you are still sitting in a burning house, holding the match they dropped there years ago. Here is the first truth worth sitting with. No one can keep hurting you without your participation. Someone may cause you real pain. They may say something cruel. They may leave, betray, mock, ignore, misjudge, blame, or abandon you. But there is a second arrow, the one that stays lodged in you, the one that replays their voice over and over, the one that turns a single moment into a life sentence. That second arrow is very often held in your own hand. This is not about blame, it is about freedom. Because if your hand is the one holding it, your hand is also the one that can set it down. Don't rush past that idea. Sit with it, even though it's uncomfortable. Your mind wants to protest, no, they did this to me, and yes, something was done to you. But what are you doing right now, today? Are you feeding the wound with memory? Are you sharpening the insult by repeating it to yourself in the shower in traffic before you fall asleep? Are you protecting your pain as if it were proof that you mattered, proof that something real happened to you? Sometimes we don't heal because the wound has quietly become our evidence. We think if we let it go, we are somehow agreeing that what happened was fine. But letting go doesn't mean the action was right. Letting go means the action no longer gets free rent inside your nervous system. Picture someone throwing mud on your clothes. Unpleasant, certainly. But if every single morning you pick that same mud back up and rub it into your own skin, who exactly is continuing the harm? The world may touch you once. Your own mind can touch you 1,000 times over. This is why training the mind is not some optional extra, some spiritual decoration. It is survival. It is the gate that decides who gets in. Without that gate, anyone with a careless tongue can walk straight into your peace and rearrange the furniture. With it, even the loudest insult stops at the door and finds no one home willing to receive it. You might say, but words really do hurt. They can, especially when they land on a place where you already doubt yourself. Call the sky dirty and the sky doesn't tremble. Call a mountain weak and the mountain doesn't shrink an inch. But call a person unworthy, and if some hidden part of them fears that might be true, the word becomes a blade. So, the real work isn't controlling every mouth that might speak against you. That's impossible. The real work is removing the secret agreement living inside you that gives those words their power. Look closely at what actually wounds you the most. Often it isn't what was said. It's what you were afraid it confirmed. Someone leaves your message on read, and suddenly you're not simply waiting for a reply. You're 10 years old again, hoping someone, anyone, will choose you. Someone criticizes your effort, and suddenly you're not receiving feedback. You're back in an old room, feeling small, feeling watched, feeling like you'll never be enough. Someone walks away, and suddenly you're not experiencing an isolated loss. You're reliving every abandonment you never fully processed. This is why a wise person doesn't only ask, "Who hurt me?" They ask, "Where did this get in? Which door was open? Which belief responded? Which old wound woke up and said, 'I recognize this pain'?" When you locate the door, you begin to find real freedom, because the next person can still knock, but the door is no longer standing unguarded. If you want to reach a place where people can no longer wound you the way they once did, understand this clearly. The answer is not to go cold. Many people misunderstand what strength actually looks like. They think it means feeling nothing at all. They build high walls and call it healing. They grow suspicious of everyone and call it wisdom. They stop trusting entirely and call it maturity. But a heart that can't be touched isn't strong, it's trapped. A closed fist is hard to injure, sure, but it also can't hold anything good that's offered to it. Real strength is not the absence of feeling. Real strength is the capacity to feel everything fully without becoming enslaved by it. A river feels the stone in its path, but it never becomes the stone. The sky absorbs the storm, but it never becomes the storm. A mirror reflects every face that passes in front of it, yet it keeps none of them. That is the training worth pursuing. Letting feeling move through you without letting it rewrite your identity. Pain may visit, humiliation may visit, anger and sadness may visit, but you don't need to build a permanent house for every visitor who knocks. The moment you say, "I am broken," you convert a passing experience into a fixed identity. The moment you say, "I was betrayed, so I can never trust again," you turn one person's limitation into a permanent law governing your entire future. The moment you say, "People always hurt me," you send your own mind out searching for evidence to prove you right. Be careful with that. The mind is a remarkably loyal servant to whatever instruction you give it most often. Hand it a prison, and it will happily decorate the bars. Hand it freedom, and it will start hunting for the key instead. Someone hurt you because they were acting from their own level of awareness, their fear, their ignorance, their unmet needs, their emptiness, their lack of discipline. Your suffering deepens the moment you let their level of awareness become the measuring stick for your own worth. A person who cannot recognize gold doesn't turn that gold into stone. Their blindness changes nothing about what they fail to see. Remember this: the next time you feel rejected, often people aren't rejecting you at all. They're rejecting the responsibility of seeing clearly. Many of us have been carrying pain that was never even ours to begin with. Some of it was handed to us by people who never learned to hold their own. They handed you their anger because they couldn't digest it themselves. They handed you their shame because they couldn't face it. They handed you their silence because they were afraid of the truth. They handed you their chaos because they had never known real peace. And because you were sensitive, you absorbed it. Because you cared, you tried to understand it. Because you wanted harmony, you quietly blamed yourself instead. But compassion without boundaries eventually becomes self-abandonment. Understanding why someone acted the way they did does not obligate you to keep letting them wound you. You can understand why a snake bites and still choose not to hold it against your chest. You can understand why someone turned cold and still choose to step out of that winter. You can forgive fire itself and still refuse to put your hand back inside it. This is where a lot of people get confused. They assume forgiveness means returning to the same table, answering the same messages, reopening the same door, pretending the same knife has somehow transformed into a flower. It hasn't. Forgiveness is an internal release. Access, on the other hand, is something that has to be earned back. Forgiveness says, "I refuse to poison myself with hatred." Boundaries say, "I refuse to offer myself again to the same pattern." Both can exist together. One cleans the heart, the other protects the life. You also need to learn the difference between pain and damage. Pain is a sensation that rises through the body and mind. Damage is what happens when pain is allowed to become your teacher without your permission. Pain says, "This hurts." Damage says, "This will always hurt." Pain says, I lost something. Damage says, I am lost. Pain says, someone left. Damage says, everyone eventually leaves. To become free, you have to interrupt that translation. You have to stop your mind from turning a single moment into a permanent prophecy about your entire future. When someone speaks to you harshly, pause before you respond. Don't react at the speed of your oldest wound. That wound is fast because it's had years and years of practice. Awareness, at least at first, moves more slowly, like a young tree bending in the wind. But if you can manage even one breath of pause, you create a small space. Inside that space, your old self wants revenge, or a long defense, or a desperate explanation, or total collapse. But inside that same space, your trained self quietly asks, wait, is this true? Is this useful? Does this actually belong to me? Is this worth spending my peace on? Most hurt continues simply because people react before they observe. Someone sends a cold message and you send your dignity chasing after it. Someone raises their voice and you hand them the steering wheel to your entire mood. Someone disrespects you and you spend hours trying to prove your worth to a person who has already shown you they don't know how to recognize it. That's like standing at a dry well, begging it to quench your thirst. A wise person doesn't argue with an empty well. A wise person simply turns and walks toward water instead. Do not make your peace conditional on someone else's understanding. This is one of the strongest chains a person can wear. You start believing, I can't rest until they understand what they did. I can't move forward until they admit it. I can't heal until they apologize the right way. But now your freedom is sitting in the hands of the very person who hurt you in the first place. You're standing outside their locked door, holding your own healing out in a begging bowl. Why would you ever hand them that kind of power? Sometimes people will never understand what they did. Sometimes they understand perfectly well and still refuse to say it out loud. Sometimes their ego is simply stronger than their honesty. Sometimes the story they tell themselves protects them from ever having to look at who they really are. Let them keep their version. You do not need their confession in order to become whole again. A scar does not wait for the knife to apologize before it finally closes. Your nervous system may not believe any of this yet. It might still tighten when you hear their name. It might still race when you remember their voice. That's not weakness. That's your body doing exactly what it learned to do in order to protect you. Be patient with it. You cannot punish yourself into peace, and you cannot shame yourself into strength. Sit beside your own body the way you would sit beside a frightened child. Speak gently to it. Breathe slowly. Say, we are safe now. That moment has passed. We don't live there anymore. Hidden inside every hurt is a kind of training, not because suffering is beautiful, but because awareness can make use of anything it's handed. Betrayal can teach discernment. Rejection can teach you how to belong to yourself. Criticism, met without collapsing, can teach humility. Loneliness can teach you how to become your own good company. Loss can teach you impermanence. Disrespect can teach you where your boundaries need to be. But only once you stop demanding that pain be fair and start asking instead how it can be useful. Don't waste the pain that comes your way. If it arrives, learn something from it. If it shattered something false in you, be thankful for the shattering. If it revealed exactly where you were too attached, study that attachment closely. If it revealed someone's true character, believe what was revealed. If it exposed a place where you abandoned yourself, go back to that place and pick yourself back up. Pain that is observed with honesty becomes wisdom. Pain that is repeated unconsciously simply hardens into personality. Some of you aren't actually protecting your heart anymore. You're protecting a story. I'm the one who always gets hurt. I'm the one people use. I'm the one who gives too much. I'm the one who never gets chosen. Notice how even a painful story can feel oddly safe simply because it's familiar. The unknown territory of real freedom can frighten you far more than the well-worn suffering you already know by heart. So, You keep choosing whatever confirms the old story, and then you call it fate. Interrupt it today, not loudly, not dramatically, not with a public post or a grand announcement, not as a performance of healing for an audience. Interrupt it quietly, in the private moment when the old pattern comes asking for your obedience again. When the urge rises to explain yourself to someone who has already committed to misunderstanding you, breathe and choose silence instead. When the urge rises to chase someone who clearly enjoys being chased, breathe and choose stillness instead. When the urge rises to replay the same insult for the 20th time, breathe and bring yourself back to the present moment. This is how a new life gets built, not through grand declarations, but through invisible, private victories that nobody else will ever see. You cannot be hurt in quite the same way once you truly know who you are. That sounds simple, but it's genuinely rare. Most people know their name, their job, their face, their preferences, their wounds, their history, but they never quite meet the awareness sitting underneath all of that. They believe they are their thoughts, so every passing thought becomes a command. They believe they are their emotions, so every emotion becomes the weather governing their entire life. They believe they are their reputation, so every stray opinion becomes a judge presiding over them. They believe they are their past, so every memory becomes another link in the chain. Sit quietly and simply watch. A thought appears and you notice it. That alone proves you are not only the thought. An emotion rises and you notice it. That proves you are not only the emotion. A memory returns and you notice it. That proves you are not only the memory. An insult echoes in your mind and you notice it. That proves you are not the echo itself. You are the one who is aware of the echo. This recognition is where real invincibility begins. Not the invincibility the world usually imagines, not an inability to cry, not an inability to care, not an inability to feel heartbreak. Real invincibility means nothing outside of you can permanently steal your inner seat unless you choose to leave it yourself. People can absolutely disturb the surface, they can create waves, but they cannot own the ocean underneath. They cannot become the depth. And once you know yourself as that depth, surface storms simply stop having authority over you. A person who insults you is really just giving you information about their own inner climate. A person who lies is revealing their actual relationship with truth. A person who betrays you is showing you exactly what desire can make them sacrifice. A person who mocks you is exposing the poverty of their own compassion. So why would you take their behavior and turn it into your identity? If a dog barks at the moon doesn't descend to argue with it. It simply continues shining exactly as it was. None of this means becoming passive. Don't confuse peace with weakness. Peace can say no. Peace can walk away. Peace can end a conversation. Peace can block a number. Peace can leave the room entirely. Peace can file a formal complaint. Peace can speak hard truths directly and clearly. But peace never loses itself in the process of doing any of that. That's the real difference. Reaction throws the sword with shaking, unsteady hands. Response holds the very same sword with clarity and calm. Before speaking from a place of hurt, ask yourself a few honest questions. Am I trying to be understood, or am I trying to make them feel exactly what I felt? Am I seeking the truth, or am I seeking control over the situation? Am I expressing a genuine boundary, or am I quietly begging this same person to somehow become someone they've already shown me they're not ready to be? These questions alone can save you years of unnecessary suffering, because so many arguments aren't really attempts to solve anything at all. They're attempts to force another person into becoming someone they simply aren't. You don't have to hate people in order to leave them behind. Hatred is still a rope tying you to them. Anger can sometimes help you stand back up, but it was never meant to be your permanent home. Stay there too long, and the very person who hurt you becomes the quiet architect of your entire inner world. You start making choices based on them, speaking based on them, distrusting based on them, constantly proving something based on them. They may be long gone, but you're still serving their shadow. Real freedom is when your next step gets chosen by your own wisdom, not by an old wound. You're allowed to remember what happened, but it doesn't get to decide everything from now on. You're allowed to recognize real danger without seeing danger lurking everywhere you look. You're allowed to have boundaries without burying your entire heart. You're allowed to be cautious without becoming permanently closed off. That balance is the real art here. One day someone will say something that used to break you completely, and you'll notice it lands very differently now. It still touches you, but it no longer enters you. It still makes a sound, but it no longer becomes law. You'll feel a small, quiet room somewhere inside yourself that simply wasn't there before. And in that room, you won't need to attack anyone or collapse in on yourself. You'll simply be able to see clearly. That's the moment when all this training finally becomes real, lived experience, rather than an idea on a page. The world will constantly try to teach you to strengthen your image instead, polish it, make it impressive, and tell yourself that then, finally, no one will be able to hurt you. Become successful, beautiful, wealthy, admired, desired, even feared, and surely you'll be safe. But this is a false kind of safety. The stronger the image becomes, the more terrified you grow of anyone scratching its surface. When your peace depends entirely on an image, every stray opinion turns into a weapon aimed at you. The real work was never to polish the mask. It's to know the face underneath the mask. Who are you without the applause? Who are you without the relationship? Who are you without everyone's approval? Who are you without the role you constantly perform for other people? What remains when the world simply misunderstands you? If you can sit inside that question without running from it, you begin to meet the version of yourself that genuinely cannot be hurt in the old, familiar way, not because life can no longer touch this version of you, but because this version doesn't need the world to constantly confirm that it exists. So much of your pain comes from quietly outsourcing your own worth. You hand pieces of yourself over to other people and say, "Please hold this gently for me." But not everyone has clean hands to hold it with. And when they inevitably drop it, you feel completely shattered. It's time to take it back. Take back the piece you handed to a parent who never once praised you. Take back the piece you handed to a partner who chose convenience over honesty. Take back the piece you handed to a friend who only valued you when you were useful to them. Take back the piece you handed to the crowd, to the comment section, to the endless comparisons, to that one old mistake you can't stop replaying. Gather yourself back together. No one can protect what you keep unconsciously giving away every single time you need someone else's approval. Before you can breathe freely, you hand over the key. Every time you need someone to regret losing you before you can finally move on, you hand over the key. Every time you need someone to treat you fairly before you'll finally treat yourself with respect, you hand over the key. Take the key back, not out of anger, but out of quiet remembrance of who you actually are. You might ask, how do I actually take it back? Start with your attention. Attention is a form of life energy. Whatever you feed with your attention grows real roots. If you keep checking their life, monitoring their messages, replaying their words on a loop, imagining what they must be thinking about you, you are actively watering the exact tree of attachment you claim you want to be free from. You can't say you want peace while feeding disturbance into your own life every single day. Your practice has to be honest with itself. Remove unnecessary contact with whatever keeps reopening the same wound. Not because you're weak, but because real healing needs an actual environment to grow in. A seed doesn't become a tree by being dug up every single morning just to check whether it's growing yet. Give your peace an honest chance to grow without constantly exposing it to the same wind that broke it the first time. Then, train the body itself. Hurt doesn't only live in the mind. It settles into the chest, the stomach, the throat, the jaw, the shoulders. When you think of the person who hurt you, your body often reacts before your philosophy even has a chance to arrive. So breathe directly into the body. Walk slowly. Stretch, sweat it out, sit upright. Plant your feet firmly on the ground. Relax your jaw. Lengthen your exhale. Teach your body, patiently, that this particular memory is no longer actual danger. The mind understands mostly through insight. The body understands mostly through repeated experiences of safety. Practice not reacting to small discomforts every single day. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Breathe. Someone speaks to you sharply. Breathe. A plan suddenly changes. Breathe. A message gets delayed. Breathe. The weather turns unbearably hot. The line is far too long. The noise around you is too loud. Breathe through all of it. This might sound small, but it isn't. This is the actual training ground. If you can't meet these small, ordinary irritations with awareness, how exactly will you meet real betrayal, deep grief, humiliation, or genuine loss when they arrive? A warrior is trained in ordinary, unremarkable moments long before any real battle ever shows up. Pain has a way of revealing exactly where you still lack inner discipline. This might sound harsh, but it's actually a gift. When one single sentence manages to ruin your entire day, it's showing you precisely where more training is needed. When one person's silence makes you abandon your own self-respect, it's showing you exactly where more self-love is needed. When one piece of criticism makes you want to quit entirely, it's showing you exactly where your identity has grown too fragile. Don't hate the mirror for showing you these things. Use it instead. The person who truly cannot be hurt is not someone everyone around them treats perfectly. That person simply doesn't exist anywhere. The person who cannot be hurt in the old familiar way is the person who has finally stopped betraying themselves after being betrayed by others. This is the real secret hiding underneath everything else. The deepest wound very often isn't what someone else did to you, it's what you did to yourself in the aftermath. You ignored your own intuition. You begged for scraps of attention. You stayed long after the pattern had become completely obvious. You spoke against your own dignity. You called your discomfort overthinking. You abandoned your own inner child just to keep someone else comfortable. So real healing has to include a genuine self-forgiveness, not the weak kind that excuses everything and learns absolutely nothing, but the strong kind that says, honestly, I see exactly what I allowed to happen, because I didn't yet know my own worth. I see where I ignored my own body's signals. I see where I confused intensity for love, attention for genuine care, words for actual character, and mere familiarity for real safety. I see all of it clearly now, and I refuse to punish myself for it forever. Instead, I will simply grow wiser. There is a version of you waiting patiently beneath the old habit of getting hurt. This version doesn't chase clarity from people who refuse to offer it. This version doesn't mistake anxiety for love. This version doesn't feel the need to win every single argument. This version doesn't perform pain just so other people will believe it's real. This version doesn't turn every ending into an occasion for self-hatred. This version simply watches, learns, chooses deliberately, and moves forward. You meet this version of yourself only through consistent practice, never through fantasy alone. Practice especially when no one is around to applaud you for it. Practice when the old familiar desire returns uninvited. Practice when loneliness whispers, text them just this once. Practice when pride whispers, go prove yourself to them. Practice when fear whispers, expect less from life so you're never disappointed. Practice when anger whispers, go destroy them the way they hurt you. Practice when sadness whispers, just disappear entirely. You are never commanded by every single whisper that passes through you. You are the one capable of hearing the whisper and still choosing something different anyway. That right there is the entire difference between impulse and real freedom. Impulse says, I feel it, so I must obey it immediately. Freedom says, I feel it, so I will simply observe it for now. Impulse says, I've been hurt, so I must hurt someone back. Freedom says, I've been hurt, so I must now protect my own clarity above all else. Impulse says, I'm lonely, so I will go straight back to whatever wounded me before. Freedom says, I'm lonely, so I will sit patiently with myself until I stop mistaking the poisoner for home. Don't underestimate the sheer power of silence. Silence isn't always the same thing as avoidance. Sometimes silence is simply a refusal to feed a fire that is desperately hungry for your breath. Some people don't actually want the truth, they want a reaction. They already know exactly which old strings to pull. They already know precisely which sentence will make you defend yourself, explain yourself, prove yourself, or collapse entirely. When you finally stop dancing to that particular song, they may start calling your new piece cold. Let them say it. A person who benefited for years from your lack of boundaries will very often call your newfound piece cruelty. But your responsibility was never to be understood by absolutely everyone. Your only real responsibility is to never abandon your own truth simply to remain likable. So many people stay hurt because they've become quietly addicted to being perceived as good. They would rather betray themselves silently than disappoint someone else out loud. They say yes while their soul is screaming no. They smile while resentment slowly builds up somewhere inside their body. They call this pattern kindness, but really it's just fear wearing a nice perfume. Real kindness actually has a spine to it. It doesn't need to be cruel, but it absolutely needs to be clear. I can't do that. I don't accept being spoken to that way. I need some space right now. This isn't healthy for me anymore. I wish you well, but I'm stepping away now. None of these are weapons. They're simply doors closing with real dignity. The more clearly and honestly you learn to speak, the less your heart will need to scream about it later on. People will test this new version of you, not always on purpose, but the moment you change an old pattern, the world around you often tries to pull you right back into your familiar old role. The person who is used to your constant over-explaining will provoke you. The person who is used to your constant availability will try to guilt you. The person who was used to your silence will suddenly dislike your voice. The person who was used to receiving your forgiveness without ever having to change will call your new boundary harsh or unreasonable. This kind of resistance is entirely expected, so don't mistake it for proof that you're somehow wrong. Sometimes resistance simply means the old chain has noticed that it's finally breaking apart. You have to become more loyal to your own peace than to your old habits. Habit will always feel like home, even when it genuinely hurts you. Peace, at least at first, will feel strange, almost uncomfortably empty. When the old drama finally leaves your life, your nervous system might even panic a little, mistaking calm itself for danger. You might find yourself craving the old, familiar chaos. You might even miss the very person who hurt you. Not because they were actually right for you, but simply because your body learned long ago to treat them as normal. Be patient with yourself through all of this. A cage can feel entirely safe to a bird that has never known anything else. Let the emptiness that follows real change actually teach you something. Don't rush to fill every quiet space with noise, endless messages, distractions, or brand new attachments. When old pain finally leaves, it leaves behind real space. And in that space, old grief that was postponed for years will often rise back up. Let it rise. The heart cleans itself out by finally feeling everything it once had to swallow whole. Cry if you need to, tremble if you need to. Write down the words you'll never actually send to anyone. Walk until your body finally softens on its own. Sit quietly under the open sky. None of this is moving backward. This is simply digesting at last what you once had to swallow whole without chewing. One of the strongest practices available to you is this. Stop asking, why did this happen to me? And instead start asking, what kind of person is this experience asking me to become? Not someone bitter, not someone suspicious, not someone permanently closed off, but someone clear, someone rooted, someone honest, someone disciplined, someone compassionate while still holding real boundaries, someone soft without becoming naive, someone strong without ever becoming cruel. Pain will always either make you repeat old unconsciousness or it will wake you up out of it entirely. Choose the waking up. When you're hurt, your mind loves to build an entire courtroom inside your head. It gathers evidence, it prepares long arguments, it calls witnesses straight out of old memory. It desperately wants to prove that you were right and they were wrong. And sometimes, honestly, you were right. But living permanently inside that courtroom is exhausting work. Even when you technically win the case, you're still trapped inside the case itself. At some point, you have to be willing to leave the courtroom behind and return to the garden instead. Life is out there waiting for you, well beyond your own argument. Justice still matters. Truth still matters. Real accountability still matters. But not every inner case you're carrying will ever get resolved by the outer world. Sometimes the deepest justice available to you is simply that you become free while the other person stays trapped inside the exact same pattern. Sometimes the deepest victory is simply that your own heart stays clean through all of it. Sometimes the deepest answer of all is realizing you no longer need any answer at all from someone still living inside their own confusion. Don't confuse closure with a full explanation. An explanation might satisfy your mind for a moment, but closure is really an internal decision you make on your own. Closure is when you finally stop reopening the same door just to check whether the pain is still sitting there waiting for you. Closure is accepting that what happened happened, that it changed you, that it taught you something real, that it cost you something real, and that you are, remarkably, still here. Closure was never about the story becoming beautiful. Closure is simply you no longer bleeding onto every single page that follows. The more you train yourself in all of this, the more you begin to realize that people rarely hurt you because they're powerful. They hurt you because they happen to touch something inside you that was left unguarded, unseen, unloved, or simply unresolved. So don't spend your whole life turning every finger that points toward your wound into an enemy. Heal the wound itself. Once it's healed, that same finger simply won't hold the same power over you anymore. Imagine someone tries to hand you a burning coal. If you simply refuse to take it from their hand, who ends up burned? This is the quiet art of not receiving. Not every opinion aimed at you has to be accepted. Not every accusation thrown your way has to be carried. Not every emotional storm someone else is going through has to be welcomed into your house. You can listen to someone without absorbing everything they say. You can witness someone's pain without becoming it yourself. You can care deeply about a person without carrying their entire weight on your own back. This, more than anything else, is what real maturity looks like. And so the practice continues quietly, one ordinary day at a time. Not through grand gestures or public declarations, but through small, private choices that no one else will ever see. The breath you take instead of the reply you almost sent, the boundary you finally spoke instead of the silence you used to swallow, the door you gently closed instead of the one you used to keep propped open out of fear. This is how a person slowly becomes someone the old wounds can no longer reach in quite the same way. Not untouchable, not cold, simply rooted, clear enough to feel everything fully, and steady enough to no longer be ruled by any of it.